All right. So who's actually done the homework? Like 100% completely done, submitted, totally done? How'd you do? Yeah? How did it go? Yeah? Anybody else? Were you able to get those two that you were struggling on? No? Okay. All right. Anybody else? Who else has gone through it? How did it go? Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Which sections did you stumble over? The if? Okay. What's it doing? Okay. All right. I'm going through this in detail mainly because I think this is like, I think when it comes to, there's kind of two things with Excel. One, it's like knowing where the right buttons are, knowing the function names, that type of stuff. And the other, so there's like the, knowing how to use the software. And then the other piece of Excel is like knowing just like how to logically think and really kind of understanding, how to put different statements together and kind of what the thing can do. So I think like we can go through all the software we want and you can figure out the buttons. If you don't know how to logically think through this stuff, it makes it really hard to do anything. So that's why I'm spending some extra time on this because I think it's important. So just as a heads up on why I'm kind of going into this detail. All right, so I've got the homework up here, and like I said, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through all the sections. I'm not going to go through like every single piece in 100% detail, but let's just kick this off and see how it goes. All right, so we've got we're going back to Booleans, so a couple of lectures ago. We've got our data table here. We're seeing a bunch of different scenarios laid out in columns and rows. So every row is a different scenario. Then we've got a bunch of different attributes, going from left to right for each one of those scenarios. And then it's asking us to do some sort of analysis based on those scenarios. All right. So this is a pretty standard thing that we're going to see. All right, so the first thing says use the AND function with appropriate arguments in cell H1 to determine if there is a force out at third base. And then it's telling us there is a force out at third base if runner on first and runner on second are both yes. Hey guys, just to let you know, I'm going through the homework 3. So just open that when you get a chance. All right, so who's got a formula for me to get started on problem 1 here? Where am I starting? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Like that? Yeah. All right, who agrees with that? Yeah? Who disagrees with that? Why? Maybe. I don't actually know. I was looking at that same thing as I was typing. I'm like, I don't actually know if this is going to work or not. Does it? All right. So it's not case sensitive. So it's saying false. It should be false, right? Because so where's a yes, yes? So number 5 down here, scenario 5 should be true. So it's not case sensitive. Yeah. All right, so since we're looking for text, and we know we're looking for text because when we click on this runner on first box, we're seeing up here that it's just a text. It's just a piece of text. It's not a formula or anything. So we know that we're looking for quote unquote yes. All right, let's go on to number 3. All right, so now we're going to use an OR function to determine if there's a fly ball. A fly ball is if the ball is catchable. is if a catchable ball is hit into the infield or the shallow infield. So can somebody give me a statement here for a Boolean? Yep.
Equal to or parentheses $11 or yes.
E11. Okay. Like that. Okay. Anybody disagree with this statement? Yes. Why is that? Okay. Do we need a dollar sign here? Who thinks we need a dollar sign here? We got one. Why do you think we need a dollar sign here? It does. So it does keep the row. Who doesn't think we need the dollar sign? Why don't you think we need the dollar sign? Okay. Who thinks they can explain why we don't need the dollar sign? Yeah. Okay. I didn't understand. Like, that's not what I was thinking. So does anybody have another thought on why we don't need a dollar sign? Yeah. Yeah, so what the dollar sign's doing, right? The dollar sign's the absolute reference. And I can either put the dollar sign in front of I can put it in front of the row or the column. So I could put it in front of the E or I could put it in front of the 11, right? What that dollar sign is doing is it's holding the reference static as I copy formulas one way or the other. So this formula will work. But I'm copying down, right? So what we're going to see is if we look at this formula, so this is E11 and F11, and then as I move down, it's E12 and F12, and then as I move down, it's E13 and F13. Because I'm moving down, the row reference is adding 1 each time. Column's not moving because I'm not moving left or right. If I copied this formula to the right, what we're going to see is I'm referencing E11 and F11 still. If I didn't have that, so if I took that away, sorry, I know I'm like talking here and stuff going on up here, so if I'm confusing people, let me know. If I took that away, so now you can see the formula is I don't have the dollar sign. And now if I copy it to the right, what's going to happen is that it's going to become, instead of E11 and F11, it becomes F11 and G11. So the column indexed one over as I copied to the right. But obviously I'm moving that equation down, so none of it matters. So the equation's fine. It with the dollar signs, it worked. There's no problem. It's just not needed in this case because we're indexing by row as we move down. We're not changing the column as we copy that formula down. Did that make sense? Did I cause any confusion? All good? Okay. Okay, so now we're going to use the not function to determine if there are, man, I love this terminology. If there are not two outs, use the outs column to in our determination. So we want to determine if there are not two outs. So can someone offer up a potential formula that I put in here to make this work? Yeah. Okay, so you're checking less than. Okay, so walk me through like that, I'm assuming, yeah. Okay, so walk me through the logic there. So what are we checking and how does that not function working? And what should it say for this one? I know I just asked a bunch of questions there.
If it's not greater, I mean, if it is, I mean, if it's not greater than 2, then it should say true, or the other way around.
Okay, so if it's, tell me this, if it's 0 or 1, what should this function say?
I mean, not. I did it for brain, I don't know how to say it. It should say false, right?
Okay, so one is not true. So if the function in here, if G11 is less than 2, right? So let's say if G11 is less than 2, so if what's inside of here is true, then this should say the opposite of it. So it would say false. Okay? Yeah? Do we agree with that? Did that make sense? So is this right? Yeah. You put equals to. So you did G11 equals 2. Yeah. So basically, if G11 is equal to true, it's going to say false. And if it's not equal to true, it's going to say true. Who agrees with that? Yeah, equals. Anybody disagree with that? So let's walk through this. So 0 does not equal true. So this is false. The statement inside this is false. So it returns true. All right. The logical statement was false, so not returns the opposite of whatever the logical function determines. All right. Is that good? Yeah. Nots are really confusing. I don't know how to change that. They're just confusing. All right. So last one here, we use the AND function to determine if all the conditions are met for an infield fly to be declared. So basically true, true, true. Can somebody give me this real quick? It's an AND function. What are our arguments? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Like that. Okay. Any dissenters? No. All right. Perfect. Looks good. All right. So that's Booleans. Any questions on Booleans? Yes. You don't need the quotes around true. Okay, so in this function, so if we take a look at this function here, so we're seeing the way I wrote it, it just says true, right? It doesn't say quote unquote true, it just says true. Again, the reason is, if I take a look at the function in kind of one of the reference cells, we're going to see that while this displays true, the logic behind it, it's not text, it's a formula. So when I put quotes, it's looking for text, but there isn't, I know it shows text on the screen, but it like Excel doesn't store it as text. So it doesn't, when you put those quotes, it's not like seeing it basically. So that's why when we're looking at these, when we're like looking for a state of a Boolean, you don't use quotes to do that logical test. All right, any questions on that? So just typing it out. All right, let's move on to if statements. All right, so let's see what we've got here. We've got some donut prices. We've got commission rates. Oh, I love calculating commission rates. And we've got an order table that's showing, we've got a bunch of different orders that show a bunch of different donuts, and it looks like we're going to calculate commissions based on kind of those orders. So let's take a look at this. So I'm going to use a if function in cell E18 to calculate the price to charge per donut for order 1. Our customers charge 50 cents per donut unless they buy a dozen or more. In this case, they are charged. So if they do buy a dozen or more, they're charged 40 cents a donut. Refer to the argument, or refer to the appropriate price in cell C11 and C12 for your value of true and value of false arguments. Okay, so I'm determining the price per donut based on how many they buy. So we know it's going to be an if statement. What do I want to check here? So let's just talk about the logical test. What's my logical test that I'm going to do to determine which price I should be using for my price per donut? Any guesses? You guys did the homework, some of you, right? Somebody should be able to tell me what this looks like. Somebody walk me through this. So what are we checking for? Okay, so what do I want to check to determine which price they should be charged? So what's C18? So C18 is the number of donuts. So what do I want to check? So I want to check if the number of donuts is what? Well, right. But so what I want to do is I'm trying to get the price per donut, right? And the price per donut's based on the quantity. So I would say if it's greater than or equal to 12, since this is 12 plus, right? But so I'm going to check the number of donuts is greater than or equal to 12. And if it is, what's my value? Right? And if it isn't, 0.5. All right, and then I'm going to copy, I'm going to end up dragging this function down. So what I would do is with these two references, I would add a dollar sign to those, right? So when I'm moving my functions down. Yes. And that would basically be it. So for this one, it's 40 cents. If I move down, let's see, one that's, for this one, it's 10, it's 50 cents. Okay, so we've calculated our price per donut. We just checked our quantity with a simple if statement. All right, so now I'm going to use an if function in H18 to calculate the commission rate for the total sale of order one. If the commission rate is 2% for all sales that total more than $10 and 1% for all sales that total more than $5. No commission is paid on sales that are $5 or less. So how about this? Before we do this, can somebody give me, maybe I'll ask a little more general question. How many scenarios am I checking here? 2. Who thinks I'm checking 2 scenarios? Okay, we got a couple. 3? Who thinks I'm checking 3 scenarios? Who's got a different number? Who has no idea? Everybody else, I assume? Perfect. All right. I like the honesty. All right. So you said 2, right? What are the 2 scenarios that you think I'm checking here? Okay, so if I've got sales, so if sales are greater than $10, I got my commission rate is what again? 2%? Okay. What's the second scenario? Okay, less than 5, it's 1. Okay. So I heard 3 scenarios. Who raised their hand for 3? I know we got 1. So so you got 3 scenarios. Tell me what your 3 scenarios are. Okay, so you're saying this is like less than or equal to 5. Is that right? Okay. So this is different because we've got a problem in here. All right, so let's see. So for all sales more than $10, it's 2%. And then I read, and 1% for all sales that total more than $5. So I would say that this is right. It's less than what is it? Greater than 5, but less than 10. Whatever, something I don't know how to write that, but basically, so it seems to me that if we're greater than 10, I guess this could be like 5 to 10. So if we're greater than 10, it's 2%. If we're between 5 and 10, it's 1%. If we're less than or equal to 5, it's 0. That's how I read it. You guys agree with that? Okay, so we've got 3 scenarios. I don't know if I think this is greater than 5. And maybe like, I think this includes 10, something like that. There's some things around the edges maybe we got to figure out, but I think we've got 3 scenarios. So how many if statements, how many nested if statements do we need to, how many total if statements do we need to take care of that? 3? I said it with a question, so it should be obvious that I don't quite agree, but how many if statements do we need? 2? Yeah, so we always need one less if statement than we have scenarios that we're trying to solve for, mainly because we've got our value of true and our value of false. 2 if statements, we've got 2 values of true, and then we've got a leftover value of false. So that's why we need 2 if statements for 3 scenarios. All right, so who wants to take a stab at this? I'll start. If. So these are our scenarios. So we've got our scenarios written down. So this shouldn't be like crazy. We've got everything written down here. So where do we want to start? Greater than 10? Okay, so we're going to take a look at sales, which I'm guessing is total. Yeah. Right. So if sales are greater than 10, our commission rate 2%, right? What's our next? So that's my first statement. Now I'm at my value of false. So it's going to be another if statement. You will need a $sign in front of this 14 when I copy it down. Oops, sorry. Sorry, I just hadn't gotten there. So that's one value of true. Give me another. So I am using it. The way I use it is I'm checking this first scenario. And if this is true, then it's 2%, right? If it's false, so now I'm after this comma. So if this is false, I'm checking in another scenario, which means if it's false, check the next if statement, basically. Okay? Okay, so what do I want to do for the next one? So again, I'm going to check G18 again, which is my total order total. What is the logical statement that I want to check here? So I know what I know from the first one, since this didn't pass, I know the order is not greater than $10. I know it's less than $10. I already know that, or equal to. So we already know that. So what is the next thing that I want to check? Okay. So G18 greater than 5, right? So we know it's less than 10. So now we're checking well, it's not greater than 10, so is it greater than 5? So I check if it's greater than 5. If it is, it's that 1%. And then what's my value of false? So I know that it's not greater than 10. I know that it's not greater than 5. I know the value is not, I know the total sales is not greater than $10. I know the total sales is not greater than $5. So on our scenario, we're down here, right? The sales are less than $5, or less than or equal to $5, I guess. So what do I want that value? What do I want that value of false to be? This is where I'm at. I'm typing in this last statement, value of false. So if I'm not greater than $10 and I'm not greater than $5, what's the commission? 0. So I got to do a couple things here because I'm checking against these reference cells and they're going to change as I move down. I want to put $signs. So I added one before 14. I'll add another one here before 13. And that's basically what it will look like. Questions? Can I answer? So you did the same formula pretty much. Tell me where it's different. Did you put it in front of the number or just the G?
I did the same thing as you, I just put $sign in front of it.
Did you all, so does yours say $G and $13 or just $G? I'm not sure why something would. Can you show me your function?
Yeah.
Uh, Let me see. I'm not sure. The only thing I would say is I I don't know why I would be marking it wrong. We can take it, like, I can take a closer look afterwards if you want, but I mean your formula looked right to me. So I'm not sure exactly why it's marking it wrong, but we can take a look. Any questions on this? All right. So now we're going to use an if function in J18 to calculate commissions earned for beverages in order one. If the beverage commission is 10% of the total sale, if the customer buys a beverage, if the beverage sale amount is greater than 0, the beverage commission equals the sale total multiplied by the beverage commission rate. Man, that is otherwise the beverage commission is 0. All right, that was a total mouthful for me. All right, let's try that again. The beverage commission is 10% of the total sale if the customer buys a beverage. Okay. So we've got a scenario where the beverage commission is 10% if the customer buys a beverage. If the beverage sale amount is greater than 0, the beverage commission equals the sales total multiplied by the beverage commission rate. All right, so it's just saying the beverage commission rate is 10%. Got it. Otherwise, it's 0. So does anybody know what we're checking here? So we're determining if somebody gets a commission, and that commission's basically based on whether or not they sold a beverage. How can we check if they sold a beverage here? Yeah. Okay. Whoop. What did I do? All right, equals if. All right, so the total, which is G18 times my beverage commission rate. Okay. Yeah, sounds pretty simple once got through the wordsmithing of that problem. Yeah, so we're basically we're checking if there's a beverage. We know if a beverage is sold because obviously the amount of money in this column. I don't know who's spending $56 in beverages, but cool. So if the amount in the beverage column is greater than 0, we know a beverage was sold, and then basically we just multiply the total by 10%. That's how we calculate that commission. All right. All right, let's do the last one in the if functions. Then we'll move on to my favorite section, lookup. All right, so Beverly treats herself to a donut if her commission is more than $40. Use an if function in K13 to determine if she should buy herself a donut. Cell K13 should contain the value yes if her commission in cell K11 is more than $40. Otherwise, it should be a no. So I know that I know the arguments here should be pretty simple because it's going to basically be, we know it's going to be if some logical test and then basically a yes and a no. So that's pretty easy. Does anybody know what I should put in? Somebody give me a logical test that I should be checking to see, how do I see if her commission is greater than $40? Okay, so what cell? So K11 greater than 40. So I didn't fill in at all, so it's not calculated. So this commission thing is just summing up everything. So I don't have the right answer in here, but yeah. All right, that covers if function logic. Again, I think this is the hardest thing, nested if statements. Just remember, when you come into a nested if statement, the easiest thing to do on these things, write down the scenarios. Once you've written down the scenarios, that'll basically tell you how many if statements, and then just go through it logically. You basically want to start at one end and kind of work the way, work through the logic to get to the other side, and it should work. And then, drag it down and check a few and take a look and see if your function works. Yeah. All right, any questions on if functions before I move? All right, we're going to do VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. And I know there's a question on HLOOKUP. The HLOOKUP problem on this is, I think, confusing. So that's kind of why we're going through this. All right, so what is this? Oh, I went to 2. All right, so use the VLOOKUP function in cell F9 to determine if the number of days it will take, the number of days it will take to ship order 1. Use the distance in cell E9 to look up the appropriate value on the delivery information reference table. Make sure to use relative and absolute references. All right, so I'm going to use a VLOOKUP. Whoop. All right. So what are we looking here? What are we looking up here? I'm looking up the distance. So I'm looking up E9. Okay. And where am I looking? What do I want to highlight as my reference table? Okay. Give me the top left cell. Okay, so just that, right? Again, I don't need to leave in or I can leave out the labels. I can just use the direct data. All right, so that's going to be the table I look up. What do I want returned? Don't give me a column. I'm trying to what information do I want back? So all right, so I'm looking for the number of days. Which column is that going to be? 2. All right, that's right. So remember when we use VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP, but it's the opposite, it's turned 90 degrees. VLOOKUP is using column 1 is always it's always related to that lookup reference. And then we go column 1, column 2, column 3. So column 2 is what I'm returning back. So column 2. And then I've got my lookup range, which isn't super applicable for this one, so I can just leave it blank. I think should be able to. And we get back that it's 8 days. Let's see if that changes anything. Yeah. I think I want it to be true anyways. It's by default true. What did I do wrong here? So I copied it down, I got some NAs. What did I do wrong? What do you got? Okay. Need a $sign somewhere, right? Like generally when I copy something down into the side, if like the function, if it works for the first one and it breaks, it's usually because I should be referencing something as an absolute reference and I'm not. That's a pretty good logic. So where should what should be like locked? Yeah, so like if I click into here, you can see that the table just shifted. Right? So the table just shifted down. So if I just make this an absolute reference, and then I copy down, it's fixed. So yeah, it was just shifting. All right, let's take a look. Yeah. So, okay, so the question is like, so why is that 2, right? Why is my column index 2? So when we're doing VLOOKUP, when I select the reference table, it doesn't, it's basically, while those are, it's got the column labels up there, it kind of treats this as its own mini table. And it basically assigns each one of these columns a number. So this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3. So I'm getting this piece of data back, so this is number 2. It's just the way the function works. It doesn't take into account the actual column references when it's asking for what column. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, now I'm going to use VLOOKUP again to calculate the delivery price for order 1. Delivery price can be referenced on the delivery information lookup table. Use the appropriate route. Okay, so I'm basically doing the same thing, right? Essentially, so what I can actually do is I can Am I doing the same thing? I'm just returning back price, right? Is that the only difference? Yeah, so what I can actually do is I can reuse some of my work here. If I add some references here, then I actually copy this over and change this thing to 3. Should just return it back for me. So I just took the same function. I made the columns absolute references, and then I changed the index column that I'm looking at from 2 to 3 to return that back. Any questions on that? Again, just kind of a quick shortcut. All right. Now let's have a lot of fun. All right, HLOOKUP. So use HLOOKUP function in cell H9 to calculate the product pricing based on the color and quantity of the billboard's order. Product pricing can be referenced on the product pricing lookup table. Okay, so I know I'm going to use HLOOKUP. What's my lookup value? Yeah. So I'm looking up what color, right? So my lookup value is color. All right. And then what's my lookup table or my table array? What's my reference table? Where am I looking? Anybody know? Sorry. 09 to Q18. So you're going from here to here. Yeah. Can I ask you, why is that the reference table? Okay. Fair. It's a brilliant deduction. It's good. Okay. Cool. So we're looking up, I mean, so we're looking at the color, right? So our reference, the thing that we're looking for is the color. And these two columns have colors in them. So that, I mean, it's okay. So there's some logic. Let's see what else comes out of this. What did I do? So you went here, yeah? Is that what you had? That okay. Cool. I had it the other way because you actually don't need the other data, but yeah. Mhm. So how we're going to use it. I guess keep going. So what are you thinking? I guess the question is, so how do you use C9 and D9?
So if you have C9 and I would just also include.
Right, but so if you remember the way the HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP functions work, this first item that I have in there is the lookup value. So we really only can look up one lookup value. So if I can't really put two items just in that lookup. So we're picking color. This might make sense in a second. We'll see. So we picked color, then we picked our lookup table. Now I need to provide my row index. Does anybody have any idea of what I'm going to pick for my row? So I got my row index number. Anybody have any idea what I'm going to put for my row index number? So if you remember when we did VLOOKUP, we did column index number. With HLOOKUP, I'm using a row index number. So I'm going down like this. The first one. What do you mean by the first one?
Does the labels count for it?
Yeah, the labels do count. So let's think about this for a second. So I'm looking up at order 1, I'm looking up the color red, and the number shipped is 4. So over here, which number do I want? Which number should come back into that? Which number should be displayed, if I've got the function written correctly? I'm in color red, so I'm in this column, right? And then I've got 4, so I should be getting back 800. Right? So what we're doing here is we're trying to find, we know the color, so we know the column, and then we return back the right dollar value based on the quantity, right? So how can I determine, I know I've got the rows here. How can I determine, what can I use to determine which row I should be looking at? Not sure? What row is this one? What would we call that? Sorry? This top row that says number shipped. Let's go back to VLOOKUP. Which column was this? That's column 1, right? So the top row up there, what row do you think that is? It's row 1. This is row 2, which just so happens to have a number shipped as 2. This is row 3, which just so happens to have a number shipped as 3, and so on and so forth. So what we can use is, since we identified the table the way we did, we can actually use that number shipped to identify the row that we want to look at. So if I actually use that as what I look at in the column, I think I want to use it exact. So let's put some things around here so we can drag this down and see what happens. So how's that looking? So when this is blue, Blue with 10. Let's see, blue with 10, it's 1100. When it's red with 5, 975. Does anybody, oops, sorry. Anybody know how this is working?
So instead of using like the columns itself, it's not necessarily looking at the table, but it's looking at the rows itself. I don't know how I'm explaining that.
Okay.
But instead of like the table of seeing it column 1 and 2, just the table itself, it's reading it from left to right. So from 15 to 9 all the way. And I guess because of what it is, then it tells you from the actual table.
I'm not totally following you. Yeah. Okay, so I think the D9 part maybe is maybe the easier part. So this makes sense, right? The table that we reference, that's where our data is. That makes sense. The reason we're using D9 is because D9 is the number shipped, right? And so 4, 10, right? So remember, when I used VLOOKUP, this was a column 1, column 2, column 3, right? With the rows, this is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. So the number shipped here is 4. Okay, so in this formula, the row index number that I'm looking at is going to be 4. So because this is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, so row 4 has a 4 in it. That's what's happening. It's looking at the 4th row, which just so happens to also have a 4. If I changed this, so if I moved this down like this, row 1 is not, it's row 1 is changed. I don't know why it went to NA, to be totally honest. That shouldn't, I'm actually surprised it did that. Oh, because I don't have the red. Anyway, so that's what's going on. It's basically this is the row it's looking for, or that's row 1, and then it's indexing down until it gets to the right row. Now the other hard part is I'm also looking at the color, right? And so that's where the color is taken care of, is in this lookup. It's basically what it's doing is it's looking up. It's basically identifying which column that it looks at, and then it goes down to that row to find where it should be looking. So that's why when we selected this table, we wanted to select the headers in the table, because it's actually using that, the way the function's working, it's using that color to identify which row it should be looking at, and then basically we're indexing down, or I'm sorry, which column it should be looking at, and then it's indexing down by row. Does that make sense? So if you think we could do the same thing with a VLOOKUP, it would be opposite, but rotated. Anyway, that might be too much. But that's what's going on here. So we're using that color to figure out which column we should be looking at, and then we use the number shipped to tell us how many rows basically to go down. Okay? All right. Hopefully that's all for VLOOKUP. All right, conditional functions. What are conditional functions? So these are COUNTIFs. I don't really want to go through these unless people have questions. I think these are, to me, these are pretty, a lot more basic than the other stuff. Are there any, do I have any questions? Yeah. Did you have a question on one of these? Do I have to do the rest of it? Do we have to do the rest of them to figure that one out? No, we don't. Okay. What is it? Okay, so use an appropriate function or formula in cell K22 to calculate the number of shirts that will be given. Wait, is that what I'm doing? Is that the right? Is that the, yeah. Okay, so can you walk me through what we're trying to do here, like, so we can explain it to the rest of the class. What are we trying to do here? Okay, so what are we? So we kind of do. So we need to count this column, right? So I kind of do need to do this one. So let's just do that. So let's do this one. So what did you? So we've got students with red hair. Had the highest average number of free throws made on the hair color summary table, and students with hazel eyes had the highest average number of free throws made on the eye color summary table. Use the OR function in cell F9 to determine if student 1 gets a t-shirt. Students get a t-shirt if they have either red or hazel eyes. Design your function to return true if an individual student gets a t-shirt and false if they do not. So what did you do for this column? We're trying to determine if a student gets a shirt based on their hair and eye color, which is a real interesting scenario, but what do you, you did an if statement. Okay. Okay, so say that one more time. Okay. So you did C9 equals red, or D9 equals hazel. Is that right? So you could actually, I don't think, like, you don't really, you can just check the or statement. You don't really need an if in there. That might be a reason why you were having trouble. Did you have, when it returned, can I just see your function real quick? So you return, that's why it is. So what you're returning is text true, and then the function isn't looking for text, it's looking for the actual like Boolean result of whether true or false. So if you actually change that to just say true or false, it would actually work instead of the quotes true, false.
So this is better.
That's better, yeah. And it should work when you do the other function, but we'll keep going here. All right, so does that make sense to people, what I just did? Just an or statement checking. We're just checking whether their hair is red. What is it? Hair is red, eyes hazel. If either one's true, they get a t-shirt for some reason, who knows? And then what are we doing to calculate how many get a t-shirt? What's a function that we'd use to, well, what are we doing here? How do we determine if they have a t-shirt? I promise we're almost done with this homework. So what am I looking at to determine if they got a t-shirt or not? We just did it. Okay, so if it equals true, so I want to count all the times that it's equal to true. What function would I use to do that? So I'd use COUNTIF. You can do this different ways too. You can write an if state. I mean, you can do that. This is just the fastest way to use COUNTIF. And then basically I select whatever. I select all my cells. I really don't feel like going all the way down. So I didn't do it correctly at all. All right, so I select my range. And then what's the criteria that I'm looking for is just true. And it should count them. I don't need a quote because this is returning, again, this is returning a Boolean, which is like a mathematical true false versus a text true false. That's why, again, I don't need quotes here. It's true. I didn't put the right column references, so this number's not right, but questions? Yeah. Which one? Eye color average? This one?
Yeah.
Okay. Use average if. So that's the first. So we're using average if. In cell K19 to determine if the average number of free throws made by students, to determine the average number of students with the average number of free throws made by students with brown eyes. So my range, what's my range? What am I looking at?
Brown eyes, so
Okay. Let me ask you a different question first. Let me ask you what the criteria I'm looking for. So which cell, where am I finding like the criteria that I'm checking? So I'm looking at a range, and from that range, I'm like looking for a specific value. In this case, I'm looking for brown eyes, right? So I'm going to be my second thing here is my criteria. That's where I'm going to be looking for brown. So I can select my criteria as H17. I know that's what I'm looking because it's brown. So where am I going to be looking? Where's the range of values that I'm going to be wanting to look for brown in? I'm looking at eye color, right? So from what range do I want to put here for looking for eye color of brown? Yeah, so D9, but I got to put a range. So what I want to do is I want to basically do this entire column. So that's the range, which means in all of these values, so I'm going to look for brown in all of those things that I highlighted. Okay? Then, if I find brown, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at another range, which is the average range. I'm going to look at the average range, and basically I pull the value out of that average range, and I average all those together. So if I'm over here, when I find brown, what I'm going to do is I'm then going to come over and take, so green, I skip it. Brown, I take the 4. Brown, I take the 9. I take that 9. I skip that one because it's blue. I skip that one because it's 7. So all the ones with brown, I'm going to add these numbers together and average them. So what I do then to select that average range, I basically select, a matching column so that when I find brown and eye color, it then goes over and grabs the corresponding value in the average column or in the average range. Does that make sense? Okay. And then you do the same thing with obviously the other colors. Your ranges won't change. You're just the lookup value that you're changing. Any questions on that? All right. Cool. Well, it's 6:45, so I've got 2 minutes, which isn't going to be enough to go into stuff. Next, we're going into like date functions and some things. Date function isn't super interesting, but we'll be doing that, and then some text function stuff, and then we'll get into charting, and then after that we'll start doing some MOS exam prep. So we're kind of getting to like sort of the end of the Excel stuff ish before we do some exam prep. So just as a heads up, that's what's going on. I had one thing on. I'm going to be at a conference on Monday, March 4th. So I'm not going to host class here. Frankly, it was a day we were going to do some like sign up for geometrics and stuff like that. So I'll probably post something to help to make sure you guys can get signed up. But I'm not going to have class here on Monday the 4th, which is in a couple weeks. Any questions? All good? Sorry, I know, hopefully that wasn't super, I don't know if it was super boring or not, but I thought it was important. Thank you.
Thank you.